Welcome to Curiosity, the podcast where science meets wonder. Join us as we explore the fascinating, the innovative, and the unexpected, from the secrets of the cosmos to the marvels of everyday life. Each episode takes you on a journey to uncover the knowledge and stories that fuel our endless quest for understanding. Let your curiosity guide you.
I want you to just stop for a second, whatever you're doing. Don't move. Just shift your focus inward. Right now, at this exact millisecond, you're hearing my voice.
And that feels simple, right? It feels completely instantaneous.
Exactly. It's like a direct feed. But if you really think about what's physically happening to make that sensation possible, your brain is decoding sound waves, it's pulling up syntax, accessing definitions, visualizing concepts.
And that's not even counting the background processes.
No. I mean, maybe you're also remembering you need to buy milk later, or you're picturing the face of the person you had dinner with last night.
It's just a flurry of activity. We're talking about billions, literally billions of neurons firing in this, this synchronized chaotic symphony inside your skull. It's a biological thunderstorm.
But here's the thing that, and I mean this quite literally, it keeps me up at night. That brain of yours, it's meat. It's biological matter.
It's wetware.
It's wet, squishy, fragile stuff. And like all biology, it is in a state of constant, relentless change. Cells are dying. Proteins are degrading. The connections between your neurons, they shift and they move.
You're touching on the fundamental instability of life.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to think of ourselves as these permanent things like statues carved from stone, but we're much more like a river.
A river, that's a perfect analogy. We are made of flux.
Constant flux.
Right. So if my physical brain is basically a construction zone that never ever sleeps, with parts being swapped out constantly, molecules degrading every few hours or days, how on earth do I remember my first kiss?
Or your childhood address.
Or the phone number of the house I grew up in 30 years ago? If the hardware is always changing, how does the data survive?
And you have just stumbled onto what we call the paradox of persistence. And honestly, it's the perfect way to frame this whole deep dive, because for all our incredible advances in modern neuroscience, this remains one of the biggest, most frustrating mysteries in the entire field.
It's the ship of Theseus problem, isn't it? That old philosophical thought experiment.
It's precisely that, the classic paradox. If you have a ship, and over a long voyage, you replace every single wooden plank one by one.
Until not a single original piece of wood is left.
Right. Is it still the same ship?
And if we apply that to the brain, if the proteins and the molecules that supposedly make up my memories are being constantly replaced, is the memory I have today the same memory? Or is it just a copy of a copy? And if it's a copy, how accurate can it be?
That is the central question. And today, we're going to try and get to the bottom of it, or, at least explore why getting to the bottom of it is so incredibly difficult. We're diving into what some call the hard problem of memory.
So we're not just talking about, tips for improving your recall or why you forget where you put your keys.
No. We're asking a much more fundamental question. Where do thoughts literally live? What material are they actually made of?
It sounds almost philosophical, but looking at the research you've pulled together today, it's actually a physics question. It's a chemistry question.
It is. And our mission today is to follow the physical hunt for what's called the engram, the literal physical trace of a memory. We're going to look at why, frankly, you can't trust your own recollections, and then we'll get into the sci-fi future of memory manipulation that, it's already here.
Okay, so let's start there. We have to unpack this word you used. The enneagram. It sounds like something out of a fantasy novel, the quest for the enneagram.
It really does have a certain mystique to it. The term was actually coined way, way back in 1904 by a German biologist, a guy named Richard Seaman. And the definition is deceivingly simple. An enneagram is the physical change in the brain that corresponds to a stored memory.
So if I learn the capital of France, or I remember the smell of my grandmother's kitchen, there is a literal physical change, an enneagram, that has to happen in my brain to hold that information.
Exactly. And for more than a century, this has been the white whale of neuroscience. We know it has to exist. If memory is real and the brain is a physical object, there must be a physical trace. It's not magic, it's matter.
But finding where it actually hides
has proven to be an absolute nightmare.
Okay, well, the standard explanation, the one I definitely learned in high school biology, and probably the one most of our listeners know, it was always about the synapses, the connections between the brain cells.
That's the synaptic model. And yes, it is still the dominant textbook explanation. And it owes a huge, huge debt to a researcher named Eric Kandel. He He won a Nobel Prize for his work.
And he didn't study humans, right? He used something unexpected.
He didn't even study monkeys or rats. He studied sea slugs. Sea slugs! Really. Of all the animals to unlock the secrets of the human mind, we picked a giant marine snail, specifically the Aplysia californica.
Oh.
And they're actually perfect for this kind of work because their neurons are enormous. I mean, some are literally visible to the naked eye. So Candle could actually see what was happening, both electrically and physically, without needing an electron microscope for absolutely everything.
Wow. Okay, so what did he find in these giant slug neurons?
He found that when these slugs learned something simple like to withdraw their gill when they were touched, the synaptic connections between their neurons physically changed. They got stronger.
So the wiring itself was reinforced.
Synaptic plasticity. That is the key phrase you'll hear in every Neuroscience 101 class. The theory is often summarized by something called Hebb's law. Cells that fire together, wire together.
Okay, let's break that down, because I hear that phrase a lot, wire together. What does that actually mean physically? Are they like welding themselves to each other?
Not quite welding, but it's a good image. It's more about reinforcing the bridge between them. So when a signal has to jump from one neuron to the next, it crosses a tiny gap called the synapse. If you use that pathway a lot, like when you're practicing something, the sending neuron starts to release more chemical messengers, neurotransmitters, things like glutamate. And on the other side, the receiving neuron literally builds more receptors to catch them.
So it's like widening a road to add more lanes for traffic.
That's a perfect analogy. Or, to use a more organic one, think about walking through a field of tall grass. The first time you walk it, the path is faint. The grass springs back. But if you walk that same path every single day,
the dirt gets packed down, the grass dies back, you create a permanent trail.
The trail becomes defined, and the signal can travel faster and with much less resistance. That, in a nutshell, is the synaptic model of memory.
That makes so much intuitive sense. It feels really elegant. It explains why practice makes perfect, why repetition works. So what's the problem? Why are we still calling this a mystery?
The problem is the timeline. This is where we crash right back into the ship of Theseus. The issue is that synapses are incredibly, well, they're unstable structures.
Unstable.
The proteins that make up those connections, the receptors, the scaffolding that holds the whole synapse together, they're constantly moving. They have a half-life of hours, maybe days at most. They're being remodeled, broken down, and replaced all the time.
Oh, I see the conflict. If the little protein bits holding my memory together only last for a few days, how on earth does a memory of my third birthday party last for 80 years?
Exactly. It is a massive fundamental math problem. How can a memory survive for decades if the storage mechanism itself is under constant renovation? It would be like trying to write a permanent message on a whiteboard that gets wiped down and rewritten every single night.
By a janitor who doesn't even speak your language.
Precisely. You might get a close approximation the next day, but eventually that message should degrade into complete nonsense, and our strongest memories just don't.
Okay. So if it's not just the synapses, where else could the memory be hiding? If the whiteboard is being erased every night, is the message somehow carved into the frame? What are the alternative hiding spots?
And this is where the research gets really interesting and a little controversial. Since the synapse seems too unstable for long-term storage, some researchers are looking at the neuronal structure itself.
The cell itself?
Not just the connections between the cells, but the actual architecture of the neuron, the physical shape of it, the way it branches out.
So like the shape of a tree's branches could hold information.
That's one idea, that the memory might be encoded in the specific branching pattern of the dendrites. But there's an even wilder theory out there that involves the proteins themselves.
But you just said the proteins degrade.
They do. But have you heard of prions? You know, the misfolded proteins that are involved in things like mad cow disease?
Oh, yeah. Scary stuff. Those are the ones that turn the brain into a sponge, right?
Very scary. But the mechanism behind them is fascinating. A prion is a protein that can change its 3D shape. And then, this is the key, it can force other normal proteins to change their shape to match it. It's self-perpetuating.
It's like a zombie protein that goes around biting other proteins and turning them.
That's a perfect, if terrifying, analogy. And some scientists, actually including Candle in his later years, started to believe that memory might work in a similar way. The idea is that a memory might be encoded in the complex three-dimensional folding of a protein that perpetuates its own shape over time.
So even if the individual protein molecule dies and gets replaced,
It has already passed its shape, its information on to its replacement. The chain continues.
a memory is literally a shape, a tiny microscopic piece of origami inside my brain that just keeps refolding itself over and over.
It sounds completely insane, I know, but it's an active area of research. We are just desperate to find a physical substrate, a material that is stable enough to explain a lifetime of memories. We need something that lasts longer than a few days.
This reminds me of that story I read in the sources, the one about the flatworms. Didn't they try to, feed memories to each other?
The RNA experiments from the 1960s, yes. That was a historical dead end, but a really fascinating one. Researchers taught flatworms to navigate a simple maze, then they chopped them up
Oh, gross.
and fed them to other untrained flatworms.
That is just disgusting and very Hannibal Lecter of them.
And the remarkable thing was the untrained worms seemed to learn the maze faster. The theory at the time was that memory was stored in RNA molecules, and you could literally transfer it by, eating it,
So if I want to learn French, I just need to eat a croissant made from a French teacher.
essentially. Now, it was largely debunked, or at least found to be inconsistent. The most likely explanation is that the cannibal worms were just reacting to stress hormones transferred in the tissue, which made them more alert and better learners, rather than actually inheriting a map of the maze.
Okay, that makes more sense.
But it just highlights how desperate the search has been to find the chemical stuff of memory. We want to be able to point to a molecule and say, that right there, that is the memory of your wedding day.
Okay, so we've got this hardware problem. We don't know exactly what the physical trace is made of. Is it synaptic weights? Is it protein folding? Is it structural changes? But let's shift gears a little bit to the software. How do we actually make a memory in the first place? Because I know if I cram for a test, I forget all of it the next day, but some things just stick forever.
That distinction is absolutely crucial. Learning is not instant storage. When you first experience something, that memory is incredibly fragile. It's what we call labile. And the process of stabilizing it is called consolidation.
The save button.
I'd think of it more like waiting for wet cement to dry. If you step on it or touch it while it's still wet, you ruin the impression completely.
And the most critical part of this drying process, it happens when you're not even awake, right?
Sleep. I knew you were going to say it.
It's always sleep.
It's always sleep. Specifically, REM sleep and deep sleep. There's this cultural myth that sleep is just the body powering down to save energy, like putting your laptop in sleep mode. But in reality, your brain is working furiously while you sleep. It's connecting something we call neural replay.
Replay. So it's like watching a highlight reel of the day.
It's literally firing the same sequence of neurons that fired when you were learning the task during the day. So if you were learning a piano piece while you sleep, your motor cortex replays that exact firing pattern, but at super high speed, sometimes 20 times faster than in real time.
And that replay does something physical.
Yes, that's the key. This replay physically reshapes the brain. It stimulates the growth of new dendritic spines, those little branches we were talking about earlier. It strengthens the connections.
So if I pull an all-nighter to study for an exam thinking I'm maximizing my time,
You are absolutely shooting yourself in the foot. You're preventing the crucial move from short-term RAM to the long-term hard drive. You're gathering all this data, but you're never actually hitting save. Sleep is active integration.
okay, so let's say I do my homework, I get the sleep, the cement dries. Once that memory is consolidated, it's there forever, right? It's static, unchanging, archived in the vault.
And here comes the biggest plot twist in modern neuroscience. The answer is no. It's a discovery that's deeply unsettling. It's called reconsolidation.
Reconsolidation, so meaning we have to save it again.
Every single time you access it.
Wait, what? Explain that. I always pictured my memory like a library. I go to the shelf, I pull down the book for my 10th birthday, I read a chapter, and I put it back. The book doesn't change just because I read it.
That's the old intuitive view. The reality, we now know, is that memory is much more like a Word document. When you open it, it doesn't open in read-only mode. It opens in edit mode. It becomes unstable and fragile all over again.
So when I remember my 10th birthday party, I'm not playing back a video file. I am literally opening the edit window.
Yes, you are reconstructing the event from scratch. And during that unstable period, the memory is vulnerable. It can be modified. New information from your present can get mixed in. Details can be deleted or altered. And then, when you stop thinking about it, your brain has to save it again. It has to reconsolidate it.
So the memory I have today of that birthday It isn't the original memory from when I was 10.
It is very likely a copy of a copy of a copy. And each time you've recalled it, it's been slightly altered by the context you were in at that moment. If you remember a sad event while you're in a happy mood, you might slightly alter the emotional tag on that memory before you save it again.
That is profound. It means our past is constantly being rewritten by our present. We are our own unreliable narrators.
It completely challenges the idea of an objective history within our own minds. We're all just editing our own life story as we go.
Okay, let's go deeper into the mechanics of this. When we talk about saving and rewriting, what's actually doing the work? Is there a little guy in there flipping switches?
Molecularly, there kind of is. There's a master protein, a transcription factor called C. You can think of CREB as the foreman of the construction site.
C-R-E. C-R-E-B. Okay, how does it work?
Well, when neurons fire repeatedly and strongly, like when you're really drilling flashcards or practicing a skill, it triggers a chemical cascade inside the cell. Calcium rushes in. That activates another molecule called CAM, which eventually goes and pokes CEB.
And what does poking CEB do?
It activates it. CEB then travels into the nucleus of the cell, the command center, and it literally turns on specific genes.
Genes, like our DNA genes.
Yes. This is the direct link between your experiences and your genetics. To form a lasting long-term memory, you literally have to change your gene expression. Those genes then produce the new proteins, the cement and the bricks, that go out and build stronger, more permanent synapses. So at its core, learning is a genetic event.
That is just wild. But here's where I always get stuck. How does a gene being turned on equal, I remember the lyrics to Bohemian Rhapsody? How do we get from a protein to specific content?
That is the ensemble coding problem. It's a huge one. The key is that a memory isn't stored in one single neuron. You don't have a grandma neuron and a pizza neuron.
That's good, because I'd hate to lose the pizza neuron in a bar fight or something.
Right. If you lost the pizza neuron, you just forget pizza exists. Nature is much smarter than that. A memory is a pattern. It's a specific population of thousands of neurons all firing together in a specific rhythm. It's like a chord on a piano. One key is just a note, but you play C, E, and G together.
And you get a C major chord. The memory is the chord.
The memory is the chord. It's the relationship between the notes, not the notes themselves.
And this brings up the hologram theory I was reading about in the notes.
Right, that's a great analogy for this principle. If you take a photograph and you cut it in half, you lose half the image. It's gone. But with a hologram, which is made from light interference patterns, if you cut it in half, the remaining piece still contains the whole image. It's just a bit fuzzier, maybe a lower resolution.
And memory works like that.
It seems to. Because the pattern, the chord, is distributed across thousands of neurons, you can lose some of those cells, which we do all the time, and you could still reconstruct the whole memory from the remaining pieces.
That explains why we don't wake up every morning with these weird Swiss cheese holes in our memory just because a few brain cells died overnight.
Exactly. It's a wonderfully redundant and resilient system.
So where is all this happening? I mean, people always talk about the hippocampus. Is that the brain's hard drive?
The hippocampus is absolutely the star of the show, but it's not the storage room. It's more like the filing clerk, or maybe the librarian.
The librarian, I like that.
The hippocampus is essential for forming new memories. We know this primarily because of the very famous and very tragic case of patient HM.
Henry Molaison. Yeah, that's a cornerstone of memory research.
It is. In the 1950s, to treat a severe, life-threatening form of epilepsy, surgeons removed his hippocampus. Both sides.
And what was the result?
The epilepsy was cured. But so was his ability to form any new long-term memories. You could introduce yourself to him, have a lovely conversation, leave the room, and come back 5 minutes later, and he would have absolutely no idea who you were. He lived in a permanent 30-second now.
But, and this is the key part, he remembered his life before the surgery.
Perfectly. He remembered his childhood, his parents, the world before 1953. This was the crucial clue. It told us that the old memories were not stored in the hippocampus.
So the librarian helps you check out the book and put it on the shelf, but it doesn't keep the book in the library forever.
A perfect way to put it. The hippocampus processes the new memory. It coordinates the consolidation process, but eventually, over weeks and months and years, that memory is transferred to the cortex, the big wrinkled outer layer of the brain for permanent storage.
And the cortex is huge. It's most of the brain.
It is. And the memories are distributed logically by sense. Your visual memories are stored in your visual cortex at the back of your head. Auditory memories in the auditory cortex on the sides.
Which leads to what's called the binding problem, right? If the sight of my dog is stored in one part of my brain, and the sound of his bark is in another, and the feeling of love I have for him is in a third, how do I experience one dog?
You've just hit on one of the deepest questions in all of consciousness studies. How does the brain stitch all these separate sensory files into one unified, seamless experience of reality?
Is there a leading theory?
The leading theory is synchronized firing. The idea is that if the neurons in the visual cortex and the neurons in the auditory cortex all fire at the exact same millisecond, at the same frequency, usually around 40 hertz, the brain interprets them as belonging to the same event.
So consciousness is basically rhythm, a synchronized beat.
In a way, yes. But honestly, we still don't fully understand the mechanism. It's the mysterious glue that holds our reality together.
It's just amazing that we function at all with this level of complexity. But let's talk about when the system fails. Or, I guess, does it fail? We usually think of forgetting as a total failure. I'm losing my memory, I'm getting old.
And I would argue that forgetting is a feature, not a bug.
A feature? How is losing my data a feature?
Well, imagine for a moment if you remembered absolutely everything. Every single time you tied your shoes, every license plate you pass on the highway today, every single bite of every sandwich you've ever eaten in your entire life.
It would be paralyzing, just an avalanche of useless information.
Exactly. There was a famous case of a man, Solomon Cheryshev, who had a condition called hyperthymesia. He couldn't forget. And it was a curse. He couldn't understand abstract concepts because his brain was so cluttered with specific, concrete details. He couldn't see the forest for the trees because he literally remembered every single vein on every single leaf.
So the brain is actively deleting junk mail.
Yes, it prioritizes. It makes an executive decision.
Yeah.
This meeting was boring and pretty much the same as 100 others. Let's delete that.
Yeah.
This moment where I almost got hit by a car, we're keeping that one. That's a survival lesson. There are actually biological mechanisms for active suppression. Your brain spends energy to forget things.
But sometimes it doesn't just forget, it invents. And I want to talk about false memories, because to me this is way scarier than forgetting.
It should be. The malleability of memory, that whole reconsolidation thing we talked about, it means we're all deeply prone to remembering things that simply never happened.
I'm thinking of that famous study with the hot air balloon.
A classic from Elizabeth Loftus, a pioneer in this field. Researchers took real childhood photos of their subjects and just photoshopped them into a picture of a hot air balloon ride. Then they showed the doctored photos to the subjects as adults and asked them to describe the trip.
And none of them had ever actually been in a hot air balloon?
Never. But after seeing the photo and being asked a few leading questions, not only did many of them remember the trip, they started adding their own rich details.
Oh yeah, the balloon was red. I remember I was scared at first, but then I loved it. I think the pilot had a mustache.
They built a whole memory around a fake suggestion.
Because memory is reconstructive, not reproductive. The brain sees the photo, assumes it must be true, and then it fills in the gaps using its general knowledge of what balloons are like and what childhood is like. It weaves a narrative to make sense of the input. And once that narrative is woven, it feels just as real as a true memory.
Which means we literally cannot fully trust our own minds. I swear I locked the front door this morning. I might just be remembering the routine of locking it, not the actual event from today. Precisely. Subjective confidence, that feeling of being sure, has almost no correlation with actual accuracy.
That brings us to flashbulb memories. Things like where you were on 9/11, or for a younger generation, maybe the day the COVID lockdown started. People feel like they have a perfect videotape of those moments.
We call them flashbulb memories because they feel so illuminated, so frozen in time. But the research shows they are just as prone to error and distortion as any mundane memory.
Really? But I can see those moments so clearly in my head.
The emotional intensity boosts your confidence in the memory, not its accuracy. The amygdala, the brain's emotion center, essentially stamps it with a high importance tag. But if we check your memory from that day against, say, a diary you wrote at the time or other people's accounts, you'll likely have the wrong people present, the wrong time of day, all sorts of mixed up details.
So emotion acts like a highlighter pen. It makes the memory feel important, but it doesn't make it any more correct.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
Wow. That is unsettling. But there is one type of memory that seems to be tougher than all the rest. And that's muscle memory.
Procedural memory, yes. This is fascinating because it seems to live in a different neighborhood of the brain.
So it's not in the cortex with all the others.
It relies very heavily on the cerebellum at the back of the brain and the basal ganglia deep inside. These are older, more primitive parts of the brain.
And this is why you never forget how to ride a bike.
Or why patient HM, the man who couldn't form new conscious memories, could still learn new physical skills. It's an amazing story. Researchers had him do this difficult coordination task, tracing a star while only looking at his hand in a mirror. He did it every day.
But he wouldn't remember doing it the day before.
Every single day, you'd sit down and say, I've never done this before in my life. And then his hand would pick up the stylus and perform the task perfectly.
He got better and better at it over time. His conscious mind forgot, but his motor circuits remembered.
It just shows that memory isn't one thing. It's a whole collection of different systems working in parallel.
Exactly. Okay, so we have these systems. We have the fragility, the reconstruction, the different hard drives. So what happens when we start... Well, when we start messing with the machinery, because we are living in the future now. I've been reading about optogenetics in your notes, and it sounds... Honestly, it sounds impossible.
Optogenetics is a complete game changer. It sounds like science fiction, but it is standard practice in neuroscience labs across the world right now. Essentially, we can now genetically engineer neurons to be sensitive to light.
Light sensitive? How on earth do you do that?
Well, you take a gene from a specialized kind of algae, basically, a pond scum that swims towards light. This gene codes for a protein that forms a little channel, and that channel opens when light hits it. You take that gene, you put it inside a harmless virus.
And you inject the virus into a mouse's brain.
And the virus infects specific neurons, delivering the new gene. So now, the mouse's brain cells have little algae parts in them.
That is just incredible.
Now, you implant a tiny fiber optic cable into the mouse's skull, right over that area. And if you shine a blue laser down that cable, those specific genetically tagged neurons will fire. You can turn them on and off like a light switch.
So you can remote control a brain cell with a laser beam?
Precisely. And they have used this to trigger specific memories. This is the groundbreaking work from Susumu Tanagawa's lab. They identified the ensemble of neurons associated with a fear memory, say a specific box where the mouse got in a mild foot shock.
Okay.
Later, the mouse is in a totally different safe box. It's happy, just exploring. The scientists turn on the laser, activating only those specific memory neurons from the scary box.
And the mouse freaks out.
It immediately freezes in terror. They physically forced the memory to play. They didn't just remind the mouse of the scary box, they activated the engram directly, and the mouse experienced the fear again.
That's the proof. That proves the memory is a physical pattern that we can externally control.
It is the ultimate proof of the physical basis of memory, and it just opens the door to some absolutely incredible medical possibilities.
You have to think about Alzheimer's first.
Of course. Right now, Alzheimer's treatments are mostly about trying to slow down the death of cells. But with this kind of knowledge, maybe we could reactivate dormant memories. Maybe the memory is still there, the anagram exists, but the retrieval mechanism is broken. What if we could stimulate the right pattern artificially and bring that memory back online?
And what about the opposite? What about something like PTSD?
This brings us right back to reconsolidation. If we know that recalling a memory makes it unstable and editable for a short period.
You could have a patient recall a trauma.
And then during that vulnerable window, administer a drug that blocks the protein synthesis required to save or reconsolidate the memory.
You could literally erase the trauma.
Or more likely, just dampen the emotional sting. You wouldn't forget the event happened. You'd still have the factual narrative memory, but you might be able to strip away the crippling visceral fear associated with it. You disrupt the reconsolidation of the emotional component.
That sounds like an absolute miracle for people who are suffering, but it also sounds like a very slippery slope. If we can erase fear, can we erase guilt? Can we erase a bad breakup? Can we erase the memory of a crime we committed?
Or on the flip side, can we enhance learning? Could I take a pill that boosts my CRE production and lets me learn a new language in a week?
Is that actually possible?
In theory, yes. There's a lot of research into genetic and pharmacological boosters.
Yeah.
Most of the smart drugs or nootropics on the market today are mostly just caffeine and hype, but the next generation might very well target these specific molecular pathways of memory formation.
And this leads to the real science fiction possibility, which is decoding.
Decoding is the final frontier.
If a memory is just a pattern of neurons firing, can we eventually read it? Can a computer look at your brain activity and translate that into the thought you're having?
We're a very long way from reading complex, abstract thoughts like, I wonder if I left the stove on. But we are already beginning to decode simple images and intentions. We can look at a brain scan of someone's visual cortex and create a rough, blurry reconstruction of the image the person is seeing.
The ethical implications there are just staggering. If your memories are just biological data, then data can be hacked. Data can be read.
The privacy questions are enormous.
But you mentioned earlier that there are still limits, that we still don't actually know the code.
And that's the slice of humble pie we all have to eat. We can see the neurons firing. We can say, look, pattern A is active. But we have no idea why pattern A means coffee. We can see the syntax, the electrical firing, but we can't read the semantics. We can't get to the meaning.
The subjectivity barrier.
Exactly. There's this massive gap between the objective physics, the electricity, and the chemistry, and the subjective experience. The actual smell of the coffee, the warmth of the memory, the feeling of nostalgia. We still don't know how matter becomes mind. We have no idea how a collection of sodium and potassium ions moving across a membrane becomes the feeling of love.
It feels like the more we learn, the more mysterious it all gets. We can dissolve the brain into its chemical parts, but the ghost in the machine is still incredibly elusive.
That's the beautiful frustration of neuroscience. Every answer just breeds 10 new, better questions.
So let's bring this all back home. We started this whole conversation with the paradox, the ship of Theseus.
We did. And we've seen that memory is distributed all across the brain, not stored in one neat spot. We've seen that it's reconstructive. It's rebuilt from scratch every time, not played back like a movie.
And we've seen that it depends on genes, on proteins, on sleep, and on this constant active biological maintenance.
And it's fragile. It's prone to error and invention. But at the same time, it's incredibly robust. It defines us.
It really is the foundation of who we are. I mean, without memory, there is no self. There's just a series of disconnected moments.
An endless present.
So here's a thought I want to leave everyone mulling over. A final provocation.
Go for it.
You said that every single time we access a memory, we change it. That means the memory that you, the listener, have of the beginning of this deep dive. Well, it's already changed. You've processed it, you've categorized it, maybe you've even altered it slightly based on what we said later about false memories.
That is absolutely true. Your brain has been live editing this conversation in real time.
So if our memories are constantly being rewritten and our biological material, the actual cells and proteins in our brain, are constantly being replaced and recycled, what actually anchors you?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? If the vessel is always changing and the ship's logbook of the voyage is constantly being rewritten, is there a permanent self in there at all? Or are we just a flowing river of biological processes, creating the very powerful illusion of continuity?
I think I'm going to need a long walk to process that one.
Just make sure you get a good night's sleep afterwards. You want to consolidate that walk.
The mystery remains active in your heads right now. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Keep wondering.